On the one hand, China is emerging in traditional terms to occupy much more space than it did before. I don't believe that the United States is in terminal decline or that will become less central to us, but I think China will occupy much more space, and I think the world order is changing and needs to accommodate China. And there are a lot of good parts to that, and there are a lot of good parts for Canada, but there are also some significant challenges. I note that, for example, countries that aspire to an Asia-Pacific presence, as we often do, there are regular meetings of defense ministers from Asia and the wider world, at which there's a standing joke that the Canadian defense minister shows up and says, "Canada is back." And they all kind of snicker, and I don't know if it's a drinking game now. They have a drink every time someone says Canada's back. But we're not really back. So at the time when we were getting engaged, we were responding to the crisis in the Ukraine. Just about that weekend when Cabinet met in special session, the one supply ship, and that's the ship that carries fuel and ammunition and supplies for frigates and other smaller vessels, the one supply ship that we have on the West Coast capable of sustaining missions into the Pacific region caught fire and had to be towed into Honolulu. So it was too delicious. I mean, our ambitions were dead in the water. It wasn't even a headline. It wasn't even a headline. And that's not to say that we need a navy for, our own sort of territorial expansion, but navies play a really important role in terms of showing the flag, in terms of training, in terms of cooperation, in terms of anti-piracy operations, in terms of enforcing environmental and illegal migration concerns, in terms of humanitarian response. America's return to the Asia-Pacific region was partly enabled by its smart response, the smart response of the U.S. Navy in the wake of the tsunami. So a Navy is a pretty important thing to have if you have Pacific ambitions, and we've kind of quietly shut down our Navy on the West Coast. So I don't think we've really begun to think about the security dimensions of the rise of China. I'd simply state that having a more active Canadian Navy presence in the Pacific, along with an Australian presence and a Singapore presence and the presence of others, is a way of diffusing what is now a very tense Sino-American standoff. The two see this as kind of a zero-sum game. The Chinese, who have a lot of historical baggage, assume that a lot of that historical baggage belongs to the United States and tend to misread and misperceive what the United States is doing. Some of that tension could be diffused or perhaps dispersed if more countries were part of that discussion, more countries were communicating to the Chinese that we understand that your rise will have a military dimension. We get that, but we also expect that it will come with the behavior of a responsible stakeholder, a responsible power.